We begin this news hour in the UK, where King Charles III has welcomed South Africa's president at the start of the first state visit he's hosting as monarch. Cyril Ramaphosa was greeted at Horse Guards Parade in London by the King and Queen Consort Camilla as the two-day trip began. The president attended Westminster Abbey ahead of a banquet tonight hosted by the King at Buckingham Palace. Mr. Ramaphosa's visit comes as South Africa struggles to tackle continuing blackouts and high unemployment. There's also an investigation into corruption, allegations he vehemently denies. Our chief correspondent, John Cookson, has the story.
When it comes to rolling out the red carpet for a world leader, a UK-hosted state visit is in a class of its own. King Charles and Camilla, the Queen Consort, welcomed South Africa's President Ramaphosa at Horse Guards Parade in Whitehall, and then came a trip up the Mall in the Irish state coach. It's the King's first state visit since his accession to the British throne, and Ramaphosa was last in Britain in September for the funeral of the late Queen. Ties between South Africa and the UK go back centuries, and behind all the pomp and ceremony, this is a state visit with a purpose for both nations. Bolstering trade ties between both countries is a vital element. South Africa represents 30% of the UK's entire trade with the African continent. It's worth almost $14 billion a year. And the President is hoping to use the state visit to drum up support for UK investment in South Africa to bolster the country's economic development and industries. But his visit comes at a time when South African unemployment levels are soaring and daily power outages affect households, businesses and schools across the country. Just as damaging, scandal-hit Ramaphosa is accused of covering up the alleged theft by robbers of $4 million in cash stuffed into furniture at his farm, and then covering it up. The president denies any wrongdoing. Tonight, Cyril Ramaphosa follows in the footsteps of Nelson Mandela and addresses both Houses of Parliament here at Westminster. Then it's on to a glittering white tie banquet at Buckingham Palace, another chance for the South African president to burnish his tarnished image back home. John Cookson, Arise News, Westminster.
And John Cookson joins me now from London for more. Good to see you, John. So President Ramaphosa, the first head of state to be hosted by King Charles since he ascended to the British throne in September. Tell us more about the purpose of Mr. Ramaphosa's visit.
Well, the purpose is on both sides, really, Charles. As far as the British are concerned, this is Charles, as you say, his first chance at hosting a state visit, a world leader, and it's getting quite a lot of coverage here in the UK because of that news element to it, Charles. And no doubt images from tonight's state banquet will appear on the evening news, and meetings tomorrow also getting some reasonable coverage here in the UK. As far as Ramaphosa is concerned, as I alluded to in my piece to camera at the end of that report, is a chance for him to re-establish his presence on the world stage in the light of a lot of problems back home, including rolling power blackouts and continuing allegations about corruption. So it's mutually beneficial for both sides. Incidentally, Charles, this visit was organised originally by the late Queen Elizabeth back in 2019, but it had to be postponed because of the COVID outbreak, and now things have settled down. It's back on the agenda, and as I say, King Charles's first hosting of a state visit. So historic from that point of view, as far as the Brits are concerned. As far as the South Africans are concerned, I'm unsure how much good it's going to do Ramaphosa, given some of the problems that are facing him in the coming weeks and months.
Well, absolutely, because of course he's facing, as you said, harsh criticism because of the state of affairs in South Africa, energy crisis, unemployment rising and so on. And Mr. Ramaphosa's predecessor, John, Jacob Zuma, also still dominating the news in South Africa. Is there a sense that Mr. Ramaphosa and the ANC are succeeding in cleaning up some of the mess of the Zuma years?
Well, they would say that they are, and of course, there's another point to make here, Charles, that there's a leadership race coming in December for the ANC, although Ramaphosa is likely to win that, and also a general election in 2024. But one can sense the hand of Zuma perhaps in the background as far as the allegations are concerned, and Ramaphosa has said that if he's charged with any of these allegations of fraud, then he will step down. So it's tricky weeks and months ahead for him, and no doubt he would be quite happy to get away from it all during this visit to London.
Well, absolutely. And you talked about him on the world stage. We know that, in addition to being the first head of state to be hosted by King Charles, Mr. Ramaphosa also had an audience with Joe Biden fairly recently. So he is mixing on the top of the sort of diplomatic world, isn't he?
Well, of course, South Africa is an important country, not only for the African continent. Wherever South Africa goes, countries like Nigeria and Kenya tend to follow Charles, do they not? And this, just going back to the point about the Queen organising this trip originally, it was to bolster the Commonwealth, and the Queen was very concerned that South Africa might think about leaving the Commonwealth, and this visit was in mind of bolstering ties with South Africa. South Africa also an important player for being neutral, if you like, at the moment in the Ukraine conflict. Ties between Moscow and Pretoria are strong, and there's a meeting with Prime Minister Sunak, when no doubt he will ask the South African president for straws in the wind or indications that he's picked up about where Putin is going with this war. So South Africa, apart from being a key trading partner with the UK, is also a key diplomatic player on the world stage.
John, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. John Cookson, Arise Chief Correspondent, and John will be back in just a few minutes for analysis on another evolving story here on Arise News. You're watching Arise News Hour. Still ahead, the death toll from Monday's major earthquake in Indonesia has jumped to 268, with dozens still missing.
Are you struggling with a health challenge? Do you need financial help to access treatment?
I'm tired of trying. I need help. I want to try IVF. I know it's expensive.
Apply now for MHSS, the Maternal Health Service Support, a discounted loan by the W Initiative of Access Bank. For more information, visit our website on www.thewcommunity.com or any Access Bank branch nationwide. You can also send an email to wcares@accessbankplc.com. Terms and conditions apply. The MHSS has successfully financed hundreds of health procedures.
The next one could be yours.
As a player, there's nothing better than the roar of your crowd. But in Nigeria, there's a roar that may not be heard again. With fewer than 50 Lions left, They could be extinct in the next few years from loss of habitat and prey and snares set for illegal bushmeat. So please, say no to illegal bushmeat. Let's keep the raw alive for Nigeria, because poaching steals from us all.
Welcome back to Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Onyegulu in Abuja. State media in Iran says the country has begun enriching uranium to 60% purity at its Fordo plant near Qom. The announcement is likely to trigger further international concerns over Iran's nuclear program. Iran breached the 60% level of purity at another facility last year, bringing it that much closer to being able to produce a nuclear weapon if it wished. It's still beneath the 90% purity needed to do so, but it's another major breach of the conditions of the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. Efforts to revive the agreement looked close to fruition earlier this year, but for now the prospects seem far less likely. Arise chief correspondent John Cookson is back with us from London, where he's been monitoring developments. So thanks for staying with us, John. So Iran's state media saying the country has begun producing uranium enriched to 60%. What's the significance of this latest move? Because it sounds like Iran is now able to produce that 60% purity at a faster pace.
Hi, Charles. Well, look, Iran has been enriching uranium secretly or overtly since 1990. Let's get that absolutely straight. And then we had the landmark treaty in 2015 that Donald Trump took the US out of, and the whole process of curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions fell to the wayside. So here we are today with this statement that they're enriching uranium to 60%. 90% is needed for an atomic bomb. But also another point to make here, right at the top, is you can have as much enriched uranium as you like, but it's worthless unless you have a method of delivering this on a rocket, and the Iranians just don't have the technology for doing that. So that kind of softens some of the alarm, perhaps, that this announcement tonight by Iran that they are enriching uranium to 60%, it kind of softens the alarm to that, because they don't have the method of delivering a nuclear bomb. However, the fact that they have this amount of enriched uranium is very concerning, and no matter how the sanctions play out in Iran, imposed by the UN and by America, they still have these facilities. And we heard about the one tonight near Qom. I can guarantee you, Charles, given the Iranian history of doing this before, there'll be other plants in obscure parts of Iran, maybe underground in major cities, maybe out in the countryside, where they're enriching even more uranium. So if they're doing that, it should come as no surprise to anyone. But this announcement does increase the pressure for the world community to try to bring Iran back into the fold and to say, look, sanctions will be eased if you stop enriching uranium to this level. The other development that's happened in the last month or so is that Russia was an ally, if you like, of the West in trying to persuade Iran to give up its nuclear program. But now, since the Ukraine war broke out, we know that Russia and Iran are allies on the battlefield. Iran supplying a lot of military equipment to the Russians. So the dynamic has changed there. The softening influence of Moscow is no longer there. So these are worrying times.
Well, I'm glad you brought that bit up about renewed cooperation between sort of Russia and Iran. And just remind us, John, of where we are with the 2015 nuclear deal, which was the accord that was struck between Iran and the West, which then died under Donald Trump. Is there any prospect of reviving it? What's the latest?
No, it's in tatters at the moment, and the Biden administration has made a strong effort behind the scenes to get things back on course, and the Europeans, including the French, have been trying, but so far no progress really leading to the reinstatement of this treaty. The Americans now seem to be convinced that they want the terms to be stronger on Iran, and the problem that Trump had with it is that the original deal had a 10-year sunset clause on it, and the view from Washington at the time was that wasn't long enough. The ban on Iran enriching uranium would have to be much longer than 10 years, because 10 years, a decade just goes by like that. And as I say, Iran's been enriching uranium, at least covertly, since 1990. There's no immediate prospect. And the other thing that we haven't discussed is that the regime in Tehran is in a very unstable state at the moment. The protests against the death of a young woman in morality police custody is now in its third month. At least 300 protesters have been shot. 5 are facing the death penalty. We had that extraordinary statement by the Iranian football captain on live television only a day or so ago, condemning, in effect, what's happening on the streets of Iran, in Tehran and other big cities. The regime could really fall at any moment. There's no signs of an imminent collapse, but certainly things are very, very unstable in Tehran at the moment.
John, thanks very much indeed. John Cookson, Arise Chief Correspondent, talking to me there from London.